Strange cargo. Detective Marla Chun stood on the edge of Dock 17, the cold metal platform thrumming beneath her boots. A cargo freighter loomed in front of her, its hull battered and patched with mismatched plating. The salvager's dagger, a ship flagged twice for false manifests, and now suspected of something far worse. Beside her, investigator Tarek of the Virellian Interstellar Commission adjusted his retinal scanner, his angular face unreadable. The Virelli were a species of precision and logic, bred for order and compliance. Marla respected that, but she often found it frustrating when people like Tarek refused to listen to what their gut was screaming. "I don't like this," Marla muttered, hand on her sidearm. "Ship's running cold on every registry. Crew ditched it 2 hours before it docked." Tarek nodded slowly. "Then we proceed with caution." Inside, the ship smelled of rust, coolant, and the faint stink of something organic left too long in the dark. The corridors were empty, hollow, like a corpse abandoned mid-stride. They moved silently, their boots clicking softly against the deck. In the cargo bay, their flashlights flicked across containers. Most were empty or filled with scrap, but one stood out, a sealed crate tucked behind a fake wall, its surface humming faintly with active dampeners. Tarek's fingers hovered over his scanner. This container is not listed in any manifest, shielded against biosigns. Marla's pulse quickened. "Get it open." The locks hissed as Tarek disabled the dampening field. A metallic click, a release of pressure, and the crate cracked open. Marla stepped back instinctively. Inside, huddled in the dim light, were 7 children. Alien, but unmistakably children. Thin-limbed, large-eyed, their skin patterned with soft, bioluminescent veins. They stared out in silence. No cries, no screams, just wide, terrified eyes and the dull sheen of trauma. One child whimpered and buried its face into the side of another. "Oh God," Marla breathed. She dropped to her knees. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now." Tarek stepped forward, running a medical scan. "Malnourished. Sedated at some point recently. Neural stress markers are off the charts." Marla reached into the crate gently, coaxing one child forward. The smallest, a girl, maybe, took a hesitant step out and pressed her head into Marla's shoulder. A strange warmth flooded Marla's chest. Sadness, relief, fear, all not her own. "She's empathic," Marla murmured. "I can feel her." Tarek blinked. Impossible. Their species was believed extinct. The Virellians, empathic telepaths, once exploited during the Guild Wars for their sensitivity. "Well, someone's still exploiting them," Marla snapped. "These are kids. Someone smuggled them like freight." Tarek straightened. "We must contact Interstellar Child Services immediately. The children will be detained for medical review and species classification. The system will assign caretakers once their identities are confirmed." "Detained," Marla echoed, rising to her feet. "Like criminals? Like contraband?" "It is standard." "It's wrong," she said flatly. "These kids are scared out of their minds. They need warmth, not another cold cell in bureaucratic limbo. The law is clear." "I don't care about the law right now, Tarek." She turned, facing him fully. "I care that these kids just spent who knows how long crammed into a crate like cargo, and you're telling me the solution is to process them?" Tarek didn't respond at first. His black eyes flicked back to the crate. One of the children, a boy, was now clinging to the smallest girl, both blinking under the dim emergency lights. "You're letting emotion dictate action," he said, more softly now. "That is not always wise." Marla let out a breath, steadying her voice. "Maybe not, but sometimes it's the only humane thing to do." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Tarek deactivated his scanner and clipped it to his belt. "There is a human medical ward on this station. Unregistered. Compassion Network 12. Marla blinked. "You know about them?" "I do. And if I were to report it, their presence would be terminated." He paused. "But I am not reporting it." She looked at him, stunned. "Consider this a temporary deviation from protocol," Tarek said, almost reluctantly. "For their safety." A flicker of something passed between them. Understanding. Agreement. Maybe even a hint of trust. "Thank you," she said quietly. We will need to move quickly. Marla gathered the smallest girl in her arms as the other children began to emerge, blinking into the light. Scared, fragile, but alive. And for the first time since they boarded, Marla felt like they were exactly where they needed to be. The unseen market. The Med Ward in Compassion Network 12 was tucked deep in the underbelly of the station, off-grid, undocumented, and fiercely protected. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was the only place where the unwanted, undocumented, and smuggled could get help without becoming government property. Marla watched the children from the observation window as volunteer medics cleaned and treated them. They were quiet, more out of habit than calm. The smallest one, Seal, as she now responded, clung to a thermal blanket and refused to leave Marla's side for long. Tarek stood next to her, arms folded. They are recovering well. Nutrient levels are stabilizing. Neural scans show reduced stress, though the empathic fields remain erratic. Of course they're erratic. They've been treated like livestock. Marla rubbed her temples. I need to find out who did this. I ran a cross-reference, Tarek said, tapping his wrist pad. The shipping container was registered to a defunct trade firm. Tracing the real owner is unlikely. Marla narrowed her eyes. Unlikely isn't impossible. Let's start with the Port Authority's manifest fraud cases. Someone signed off on that container. Someone always gets paid. Tarek hesitated. This may be dangerous. That's why we're good at it. They descended into the lower levels of the station, the unregulated zones where vendors peddled black market stems, off-world biomods, and falsified IDs without shame. The air buzzed with neon signs and quiet desperation. Marla's badge meant nothing here, and Tarek's Valari insignia earned him side eyes and silence. They found their contact, a junk dealer named Mox, behind a curtain of rusted droid parts. He recognized Marla immediately. Chun, he grunted, pulling goggles down to his neck. Still poking your nose where it don't belong? I've got a crate ID, she said, cutting to the point. Came through last cycle. I want the buyer, seller, and whoever turned off the scanner logs. Mox squinted at the data pad she held out, whistled low. You're digging real deep this time. Kids were inside, Mox. Virellian kids. That got his attention. He glanced over his shoulder, then snatched the pad and plugged it into a cobbled terminal. You didn't get this from me, he muttered. People start asking questions, I start losing fingers. After a few tense moments, a file loaded. Multiple transfers. Scrubbed signatures. But one name repeated. Orlan de Thrax, ambassador to the Navari consulate. Diplomatic credentials, Tarek said, voice tight. That complicates matters. Understatement, Marla muttered. No one touches a diplomat without triggering a dozen treaties. Mox cut in. Word is, de Thrax has been collecting rare wards for years. Showpieces, pets with pedigree, sold or traded to clients with big credits and zero conscience. Marla's grip tightened. He's trafficking children. Tarek turned to her. This is beyond station authority. We must contact interstellar oversight and watch the case get buried under protocol, she shot back. By the time anyone acts, those kids will be claimed as recovered property and gone forever. You are suggesting we act outside the law. I'm suggesting we save them. There's a difference. Before Tarek could reply, Seal's voice touched Marla's mind. Light as a whisper, but piercing with emotion. Hiding, hurting, cages, scared. Marla staggered slightly. Seal had reached out from across the station, somehow projecting directly into her thoughts. Tarek's eyes widened. I felt it too. A memory, or distress echo. From her, Marla said, stunned. She's reaching out. Seal had shown them a memory, brief but vivid. A circular room, shiny floors, other children crying in glass enclosures, and looming above them, a tall alien figure, de Thrax. Tarek looked shaken. She linked us to the trauma. That level of telepathic range is unprecedented for her species. She's asking us to stop this, Marla said quietly. We're the only ones who've even tried. He looked at her for a long moment. Then I will help. But we must proceed carefully. Marla smiled faintly. You sure you're not becoming a little too human, Tarek? He didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. Back at the ward, Seal looked up as they returned, eyes wide with hope. Marla knelt beside her and took her hand gently. "We found him," she whispered, "and we're not going to let him hurt anyone else." Crossroads of justice. Dithrax's diplomatic residence towered over the Navari sector like a black spire, sleek, cold, and impenetrable. It was technically neutral ground, governed by interstellar treaties and guarded by protocol drones that didn't ask questions, which was exactly why Marla hated it. Inside the ward, Marla paced as Tarek studied the memory imprint Seal had projected to them. The child sat quietly, eyes closed, small hand gripping a corner of Marla's coat. Despite everything, she trusted them. "She gave us evidence," Marla said, glancing at Tarek. "Memory-locked recall. You said empathic transfer of this level is rare, even among her kind." "Correct," he replied. "But memory projections are not admissible in most interstellar courts. They are considered too subjective." "Not admissible," Marla muttered. "But he can own kids like antiques, and that's fine." Tarek's silence was answer enough. "Look," Marla continued, lowering her voice, "we go through proper channels and Dithrax walks. Maybe the kids disappear. Maybe they get handed over as legal wards of some off-world buyer. Either way, we lose them. And if we act against a diplomat without authorization?" Tarek asked. "We make it loud. We make it visible. We expose him in public where the networks can't ignore it." Tarek regarded her. "You are suggesting we bait a powerful trafficker in his own territory, provoke an illegal reaction, record it, and leak the footage. That's the plan, yes. You are entirely reckless." She smirked. "You're still here, aren't you?" Hours later, Tarek's ship, a sleek Volari reconnaissance vessel, hovered in stealth mode above the Navari consulate's secondary landing platform. Below, Marla crouched with a microcam drone in hand and a small case of forged documents that identified her as a buyer. Tarek's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Your cover identity is transmitting. Entry will be granted under Merchant Visa Code 482. Copy that. Tell Seal I'll be back soon." "She already knows," Tarek said. "She's sensing you." Marla swallowed. "Then I'd better make it back." Security admitted her with no trouble. The guards didn't even blink at her cover. She was expected. A servant led her into a glass-paneled sitting room filled with artifacts and trophies from half the known systems. Dithrax arrived moments later, tall, slim, and smiling the way a snake might smile before striking. "Ah, the merchant from Zoria Prime. You're early. I prefer to inspect before I invest," Marla said coolly, keeping her microcam focused through her lapel pin. "Of course," Dithrax replied. He gestured, and a door slid open. Inside, 3 children stood in a display-like chamber, too still, too quiet. Not like children, like stock. Marla's stomach turned, but she kept her voice even. "Pedigree. Virellian. Extremely rare. Their empathic talents are versatile. I personally ensure their training. This batch is ready for imprinting. Price. For you? A bonded pair at 80,000 units." Marla let that hang in the air. Then she took a slow step forward and said, "They're not for sale." Dithrax's smile vanished. "Excuse me," I said, "they're not for sale." At that moment, her lapel light blinked green, stream live active. Marla raised her voice. "You're being recorded. This entire facility is under live uplink to the Volari Truth Commission and the Human Consulate. This is evidence of illegal trafficking of sentient minors." "You're done, Dithrax." The ambassador's eyes narrowed, and the room darkened slightly as silent alarms activated. "You are either brave or foolish, human. Why not both?" Marla backed toward the door. Dithrax lunged, unnaturally fast, and she barely dodged, stumbling as guards spilled into the room. A stun blast missed her shoulder by inches. Suddenly, the wall behind her exploded inward, Tarek's drone unit cutting a clean entrance. He stood in the smoke, plasma baton in hand. "Proceeding with your reckless plan?" he said. Marla grinned and grabbed one of the children. "About time." Tarek tossed her a shock grenade. She lobbed it into the hallway, grabbing the remaining kids as the blast knocked back the guards. Siren screamed. They ran. Back on the ship, the children huddled in blankets as Marla and Tarek watched the news feed. Leaked footage implicates Ambassador Thrax in a smuggling ring. Confirmed Virellian miners recovered. Investigation pending. Consulate sealed. Tarek turned to Marla. You realize what we did violates at least 7 major treaties. Marla smiled, exhausted. Yeah, but we saved them. Tarek nodded. Perhaps humanity is not as irrational as we believed. Seal leaned against Marla's side, safe at last. Her voice brushed softly against both their minds. Thank you. A place to belong. The fallout came quickly. By the time Marla and Tarek returned to Compassion Network 12, the entire station was buzzing. News channels looped the footage of Thrax's trafficking ring, beamed from the Volari ship's hard drives across dozens of systems. Commentators speculated on the future of Nivari diplomacy. Protesters gathered outside embassy outposts. And most importantly, the children were no longer invisible. Still, exposure didn't equal resolution. Inside the ward, the Virellian children sat in a quiet circle, hands clasped. Seal looked up the moment Marla entered, her glowing veins pulsing faintly with recognition. Marla crouched beside her. Hey, kiddo, you okay? Seal nodded slowly, then touched Marla's wrist, projecting a wave of emotions. Curiosity, anxiety, hope. She's asking what happens now. Tarek translated from behind her. Marla sighed, glancing at the others. That's the hard part. Though Thrax had been publicly disgraced and his network dismantled, the children were still in limbo. No home system, no official guardians. As far as the interstellar government was concerned, they were undocumented relics of a species thought extinct. No state wanted to claim responsibility. Interstellar Child Services proposed temporary containment facilities, Tarek said. Monitored, humane. But still, facilities. Marla's expression darkened. That's just a cleaner cage. Tarek hesitated, then said quietly, there may be another option. She turned toward him. Among the Volari, there's a tradition, a kind of familial sponsorship, bonded guardianship that transcends species. It's rarely invoked for non-Volari, but not prohibited. Marla stared at him. You're saying you'd take them in? I'm saying we both could. Together. That gave her pause. You? She asked, a small smirk forming. The guy who thought feelings were liabilities? I've since revised my stance, Tarek said with no trace of humor, but his tone was gentler than usual. Empathy, as demonstrated by these children, is not a weakness. It is a strength that must be protected. Marla looked back at the kids. They weren't broken. They were surviving, connecting. Despite what they'd been through, they reached out to each other, and to her. She'd never planned on being anyone's guardian. She lived out of a duffel bag and a locker on 3 different stations. But somehow, Seal had curled into her heart like a vine taking root. You think we could actually raise them? She asked softly. Tarek glanced at Seal, then at the others. Not raise. Support. Teach. Shield them until they choose their own way. Marla nodded slowly. All right, let's do it. The sponsorship required days of appeals and interstellar filings. Volari diplomatic channels had to be coaxed. Human consular networks had to validate psychological compatibility. Marla had to submit to more personality profiling than she ever thought possible. But it worked. A month later, they stood in a sunlit atrium on Volari Prime, in the center of the Guardianship Council chamber. Seal stood between them, dressed in the traditional ceremonial tunic, holding the hands of her siblings. The council's eldest, a silver-skinned Volari named Vasen, stepped forward and addressed the chamber. Today we recognize an act of protection beyond species and protocol. 2 officers, human and Volari, chose compassion when the law faltered. In doing so, they preserve a spark once thought extinguished. These children are no longer lost. They are Virellian, and now they are family. The chamber lit up in bioluminescent waves as the council stamped their approval. After the ceremony, the children ran through the grass fields of the compound, laughing, a sound Marla had never expected to hear from them. Tarek sat beneath a blossom tree, eyes closed, tuning into their empathic pulses. Marla joined him, arms crossed loosely. So she said, you still think this is temporary? He opened one eye. Statistically, Emotional bonds form quickly under high-pressure, altruistic conditions. That a yes or a no? Tarek didn't answer. But beside them, Seal ran up and pressed a small hand into Marla's. Then she reached out and touched Tarek's shoulder. Her voice, no longer just in their minds, whispered aloud. Home. Marla blinked, then smiled. Yeah, kid. That's right. She looked at Tarek, who met her gaze with a rare softness. This wasn't the life either of them had imagined. But in the ruins of someone else's cruelty, they'd built something real. Something that mattered. A family, not by blood but by choice. And that made all the difference.